Welcome to KAUST Live. I'm Nicholas DeMille. I work here at the university's Communications Department. And today we're speaking with Ramesh Rao. He is the director of the California Institute for Telecommunications and Information at UCSD. Do I have that right?
Information Technology.
Information Technology, thank you. I'm sorry. Or otherwise known as the Qualcomm Institute.
That's correct.
So tell us what happens there. Give us the overview of that place.
So the story goes back about 16 years. The state of California wanted to make an investment in creating enterprises in the UC system that would foster interdisciplinary research. So we got significant $100 million from the state of California for a 2-campus undertaking. But the deal was to be able to match it 2 for 1 by going out and securing resources from other sponsors of research. So we reached out to industry, we reached out to federal agencies, we reached out to international partners. And it's all about doing things in an interdisciplinary manner. And that was, we were set up at the end of 2000. In 2007, we hosted some of the KAUST leadership, and it was just perfect timing. Our building had just come online in 2006. We had been talking about doing interdisciplinary things and figuring out how to stand up the infrastructure to support that. And when we heard about what KAUST was interested in, it was just such a perfect coming together of intentions and ideas.
Very good. So you've been to KAUST on a number of occasions, actually.
Yes, absolutely. The first time I was here was in 2008. I was in the Eastern Province, actually, and came out here for a visit. This was a construction site, quite different from what it looks like today.
Tell me, are you part of the Cal IT Squared? Is that something that you're involved in? And if it is...
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm responsible for all the activities at UC San Diego.
Okay.
Our sister campus is UC Irvine. And what that sort of boils down to is creating shared infrastructure and reaching out and connecting with faculty from all parts of campus who come into the facility. We have a building that can house approximately 800 people. Most of them are graduate students and postdocs, but faculty from about 22 different departments. So it's learning to work with all these disciplines, understanding how they organize the questions, the hypotheses they pursue, and trying to figure out how to put it all together so they can do things they can't do in their own home environments.
And so give us some examples of how you help put it all together for them.
So from the infrastructure side, we invested significantly in creating advanced labs. Nanotechnology was one of the areas. So clean rooms, fully staffed, open 7/24, open to the industry, staff of 10, advanced lab for photonics, advanced labs for wireless, and then visual analytics, which ended up being part of the partnership that we built with KAUST. So the cornea, for example, that you have here on campus, that is a product of the collaboration that we were able to establish.
Oh, very good. Do you have a sister resource there?
Absolutely, yeah. If you were to come down and see our facility, you would recognize it. Yeah.
Oh, very good. I think you're involved in the development and deployment of sensor networks in a research capacity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So, with the advent of the 5G systems, one is getting ready for next generation Internet of Things, 50 billion devices, and so on and so forth. But the expertise that we have allows us to get into really advanced sensors, sensors that you might deploy in the environment, but a lot of it would be sensors that you might deploy inside the human body, self-powered, powered out of body fluids, if you wish. So being able to extract signals from places that normally has been very difficult to get to. So bringing together folks from the School of Medicine, technologists who actually build these new things, people who do the data analysis. Data science is a big topic of much interest to a lot of our students. So putting it all together really allows you to create systems. I should also mention that in recent years there's been an interest in commercialization and startups. Wasn't as a significant part of what we undertook back in 2000, but we now have space in the institute to house startups. And make it easy for them to launch themselves. They can use our labs as external users, take advantage of the proximity, involve students, work closely with faculty. So we have more than a dozen startups now availing themselves of our shared use facilities.
Any notable examples, things that stick out to you as kind of model examples of startups?
So one of the earliest ones is actually a non-profit startup called Foundation for Learning Equality. What they did was they took the content initially of the Khan Academy and put it in a format that made it accessible to people who are off the grid, right? So imagine sub-Saharan Africa, you have a memory storage device, you have Wi-Fi, you have cheap tablets, and once in a way you need to sync up the lesson plan so that you can do the back-end analytics and figure out if the methods of delivery are effective for that environment. So Foundation for Learning Equality now has a presence in 162 countries. It would have been hard for us to find our way to so many locations. Fire prediction, this is another issue that is of great interest in Southern California. We tend to have wildfires. And so how could you fuse together information about the fuel load, the topography, the micro weather conditions to be able to predict which way the fire might spread down to about 10-meter accuracy. So a real fireman in the field can whip out their smartphones, even if there is no connectivity, they can see for themselves, how to fight that fire. That's a startup.
Right. How do you help them solve, obviously, these Internet of Things type solutions, in particular the firefighting? How do you help them solve their big data problems? Because obviously they're going to be collecting a massive amount of information.
So what's interesting, thank you for asking that question. You probably heard it said that today's smartphones have as much power as supercomputers of the 80s, right? So they actually are able to write computational models, taking advantage of the infrastructure inside a phone that allows you to do all these fancy graphics and actually crunch the numbers on the phone itself. So the advances in the computational capabilities of a smartphone, not just the communication capabilities, is a very critical part of it. It's also becoming more and more easy to fly drones and run LiDAR scans. So you actually have very accurate topography information. So when you put it all together, the best computational models can be run on these smartphones today.
Right. Another area of research that your profile lists is photonic networks. So talk a little bit about photonic networks. What are those?
So, the core of the network of the internet, you have very high data rates, and sometimes you're transmitting across continents, underwater cables and so on. And even though you can move data at much higher rates, you need to do it at even higher and higher rates. So a lot of the work that's taking place in the photonics area is in using methods that have been used to aggressively exploit wireless channels, but this time on a fiber. Fiber is no longer a homogeneous piece of glass. The fiber itself can have structure built into it that will channel the flow of signals in a way that does not require as frequent regeneration as used to be the case. So a great deal of interest in the transmission. But to be honest, from a cybersecurity perspective, you want to be able to trap viruses and other malware that's flowing on this really high-speed links. And the energy costs of turning the signals from photonics to electronic and then sniffing for the bad stuff gets prohibitively high. So you got to find a way to filter things in the optical domain. So being able to do many of these operations that we traditionally do electronically, entirely optically, that's one of the larger efforts.
Interesting. So is this both sending information over short distances but at massive amounts, as well as sending it over great distances? So there could be shared supercomputing resources?
Absolutely. So data centers that, companies like Google, Facebook, and so on rely on so much require really intense communications inside the data center. And then, of course, you have traffic that goes from one data center to another, perhaps across continents. So yes, you're absolutely right. You need an environment that can support really super high speeds.
Right. I was interested, and I've been told a number of times that one of the biggest challenges is actually a fairly low-tech challenge for some of the supercomputers, which is simply writing to a disk. So is this also a solution that helps work around some of those challenges? Or?
Yes, we actually have an effort on memory storage, new architectures, new materials, higher densities. But moving the data to these memories is where, of course, the communication part comes in. Yeah, no, it's one integrated problem that you have to solve. If you just increase storage densities, but communication becomes the bottleneck, that's not going to do you much good.
So then how does the development of these technologies move away from simply creating another big problem to making some sort of quantum leap to a much faster solution, or something that's going to solve some of these bigger research questions?
So one method that has emerged, to be honest, since we were established, is the establishment of these grand challenge awards, like the X Prize Foundation, right? There's the Qualcomm tricorder challenge. You know, it's this super duper device that'll scan you and within minutes figure out what's wrong with you. They don't pay for the research, so it's kind of an interesting approach, but they just have this big giant prize at the end, $10 million, for example. And so you pull on everything that you can, not just the ones that you are good at, but things that others have developed, and there's this intense time pressure. And so we are finding more and more these challenge awards being used. DARPA uses that, like the whole autonomous car thing came out of the DARPA challenges. At the undergraduate student level, we see this enormous interest in hackathons. Self-organized groups want to get together, go at some problem. You know, Red Bull, 48 hours under a tent gets everybody's creative juices flowing. And it's just amazing to see how much can be accomplished when you have such a focused effort.
Right. So then you're an endowed chair in telecommunications, a Qualcomm endowed chair. Talk a little bit about how that came about and what that means.
So sort of to step back a little bit, Qualcomm has been an extraordinary supporter and sponsor of the center. Irvin Jacobs, co-founder of Qualcomm, used to be on our faculty and is an amazing man in terms of his ability to understand how a corporation like Qualcomm might engage with a research university, the long-term nature of the relationship. So Qualcomm has been extraordinarily generous to us in terms of providing gifts. So there's no intellectual property expectation. They don't really tell us what to do our research on. And part of that support went to the creation of these endowed chair positions. What it does is for the recipient to be able to enjoy a certain amount of resource to spend as they see fit. Now, we all raise large amounts of money from sponsors who want us to work on a specific problem. But even a little bit of money that you might spend, to chase after your dreams can make a huge difference. So I feel very fortunate that I've had this opportunity. So there are 4 endowed chairs created by Qualcomm, a couple created by Ericsson. And so that's part of what got us going and helped us integrate with the rest of the campus.
So do you want to tell us what your dream is?
So I have gotten more and more attracted into using body sensors to sense what's happening inside the body. You know, the human body is an unusual system. It's highly adaptive. As electrical engineers, we tend to think in terms of input-output systems. You have a circuit, you apply a signal, and you expect an output which is almost always reproducible. But the human body changes with time. So as you build these sensors that allow you to keep track of what's happening inside you, can you get a deeper understanding of how the human body reacts in pursuit of wellness, rather than wait for things to go wrong. I've also taken to experimenting on myself. So I took to running. Actually, I was out running this morning. Yoga. These are all practices that you tend to think of in more intuitive ways. There's a lot of folklore around it, what good it does and how you get good at it. But it's been a fascinating journey for me to be able to quantify, to understand how objectively, so to say,
Right.
how the body actually reacts to these practices.
So is this kind of like the natural extension of wearables? Would these be implantable sensors? Would these be, I don't know, something you would swallow and it would sensor it?
Yes, all of the above.
Okay.
Things that you might even leave inside your body for long periods of time. But where I want to go personally, and I take advantage of my flexible resources to pursue that, is not just sensing the obvious. You know, at the end, as an engineer, you want to change something. Right? If all I got was Fitbit telling me how many steps I took every day, after about 5 years of looking at that readout, you want to know what next. And so intervening. So if you feel like you want to change something about yourself, that's when it becomes more challenging, because the human body will play all sorts of tricks on you. So getting closer to biology, biological systems, coming in as an electrical engineer, you know, for me, it's very fascinating.
So given all of your various experiences, what, if any, things do you have, nuggets of wisdom, insights that you think would apply to, you know, emerging universities in terms of their use of, you know, IT infrastructure, supercomputing, or, you know, trying to take advantage of almost leapfrogging over some of the more staid institutional challenges?
Yeah, so this is the age of big data, and my colleagues who have spent their entire professional career studying big data point out that it's all about the data set that you work with. So KAUST, for example, is right here on the Red Sea. This is unique data sets that you can extract from the Red Sea to be able to pose questions that are relevant, in a broader context, but certainly very relevant to the environment that you find yourself in, and having access to a large data set that allows you to go to work. My own personal interest in big data has evolved to attempt to infer causality. Right? So again, it's the same thing. You look at a lot of data, sometimes all you want to do is predict, like weather or climate. But sometimes you want to change it. So how do you figure out, when you have these large data sets, how might you intervene? So public health, obesity is a problem in many parts of the world. How do you change? How do you induce behavior modification when you have a large data set? It's very different from being able to look at the data and find correlations and find patterns and so on. So that next step is being able to make a change. So understanding causality, to be more precise, that's an area that...
I see. So with these big data sets, being able to go in again and again to get feedback instead of getting some insight and trying to act on it full bore, but getting insight and continued feedback so that you can move past plateaus and things and these sorts of things.
So yes, absolutely. But if I might draw attention, you know, there's lots of correlations that you'll find in data. And when that's what you have, you can't actually change things unless you figure out which one of the many things that are kind of correlated with each other actually will lend itself to intervention. Let me give you a concrete example. There's a research done by a group of folks at UC San Diego and Harvard, where they looked at social networks of individuals who are overweight, okay? And they tested the hypothesis on what do you do to get them to change their lifestyle. And they found it comes not from talking to them directly, but getting two of their friends to talk to them while making them aware that they talk to each other also. So you react to peer pressure when you know that your peers are also talking to each other. It's kind of a strange sort of insight, right? Your first instinct is to send them the literature telling them, you know, all the hazards and all the dangers and all the benefits and so on. But apparently the message has to be delivered by their friends. So how do you extract this kind of insight? That's also an interdisciplinary thing, you know, it's serious social science research, serious data science, serious medical understanding of what are the causal factors and so on.
Very interesting. Well, Ramesh, thank you so much for stopping by to talk to us. That's all the time that we have for today.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, and I hope the rest of your time at KAUST is enjoyable.
Thank you.